Purpose is not a destination, it's a guide to consciousness. Hello everyone, today we're going to dive deep into something that might change the way you think about your life's direction. Picture yourself, right now, standing at the edge of a vast, open field, a place where your path seems limitless, but there's no clear road ahead. It's beautiful, almost calming, but with just a touch of discomfort. A place where you should know where you're going, but somehow, you don't. You're standing in uncertainty. You probably won't survive this discomfort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always like to know where you're tuning in from. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. That moment of discomfort, when I felt like I was standing in front of endless possibilities, was the moment I realized something that shifted my whole perspective. It wasn't a massive epiphany or a life-changing event. It was just a quiet understanding, a whisper in the back of my mind: purpose isn't a destination, it's a guide to consciousness. Before that, I had spent years thinking that purpose was something concrete, something you could define, chase, and eventually arrive at. I imagined it as a neatly packaged thing, something that would give my life structure and meaning, like a treasure map where every clue led to the final prize. I thought there was an endgame. But the moment I realized purpose wasn't something I could simply find, everything started to change. It wasn't about where I was going anymore. It was about how I was walking, every step, every breath. And the direction? Well, it wasn't as important as I thought. You ever spend hours, maybe even days, looking for the right purpose? I know I did. I had this image of what I was supposed to be doing in life, something big, something defined. The idea of having a singular purpose was so enticing. It seemed like it would answer everything, solve every riddle about myself. I wanted to wake up and know exactly what my purpose was, have a roadmap that took me from A to Z without any deviation, no second guessing. But the more I searched, the more I felt lost. There's something I've learned over the years, something that always seems to catch me off guard: when you chase purpose like it's a destination, it's like trying to catch the wind. You can feel it, you know it's there, but it's never quite in your grasp. Every time I thought I had it figured out, life would throw me a curveball, and I'd have to start all over again. What happened to me, and I think to a lot of people, is that I started to equate purpose with doing. I'd think, if I just find the right thing to do, then I'll be fulfilled. Then, I'll be on the right path. But here's the thing: purpose isn't about doing something at all. It's about how you approach the doing. It's about the process, the experience of being on a journey, not about a final destination. The search for purpose felt like a hamster wheel, where I kept running harder and faster without ever getting anywhere. The more I chased it, the more elusive it became. And the worst part? The more frustrated I got, the further I drifted from the peace I thought purpose would bring. I mean, can you relate to that? Trying to hustle for this perfect version of your life, only to feel emptier after every step. It's like playing a game where the rules keep changing right under your feet. So, I had to stop. I had to pause and rethink what purpose actually meant, because the way I was approaching it was clearly wrong. And that's where the shift happened. I stopped looking for a destination and started letting purpose show up in the process. At some point, I realized that purpose isn't the thing you find, it's the thing that helps you navigate uncertainty. That moment of realization felt like a deep breath after holding my lungs hostage for years. I was so busy looking for an answer, a singular, neatly packaged truth, that I had missed the simplest and most profound understanding of all: purpose doesn't give you all the answers. It simply gives you a guide to move through life with more intention. I've always admired the way some people seem to have it all figured out. They have this clear sense of direction, this unwavering belief that they know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. The kind of people who exude confidence in their every step. At one point, I wanted to be just like that. But when I thought about it long enough, I realized that I was mistaking their certainty for something that actually mattered. What if their purpose wasn't the destination but the way they embraced the journey, the way they adapted to the ebb and flow of life. Purpose, I began to see, wasn't about being sure. It was about staying present, about being guided by your values, even when the future is uncertain and unclear. It's less about the rigid certainty of knowing exactly what's next, and more about trusting that, regardless of what comes, you'll have the tools, the awareness, and the inner compass to move forward. The truth is, life isn't static. There is no one perfect plan. And that's what makes purpose so liberating. It's not about fitting your life into some perfect mold, it's about flowing with it, and finding meaning in the twists and turns. I think we get stuck sometimes because we mistake purpose for something fixed, like it's a box we're supposed to check. The reality, though, is that purpose is fluid. It changes with us, and if we let it, it can grow with us, guiding us through the unknowns, not as a set of directions, but as a gentle hand on our shoulder reminding us to trust ourselves along the way. I wasn't ready to embrace uncertainty. No one really is. But life has a funny way of forcing you to adapt, doesn't it? The more I allowed myself to acknowledge that I might never have all the answers, the more freedom I felt to experience life as it came, moment by moment. And the more I leaned into this uncertain flow, the more my purpose unfolded in unexpected and beautiful ways. I'm not sure exactly when I first realized it, but somewhere along the way, I began to see the dangers of defining purpose too rigidly. It's one thing to be on a path that feels meaningful, but it's another to believe that your purpose has to fit inside a predefined box. The kind of box where there's a single, right answer, and if you stray even a little from that path, you risk losing everything. I had spent so much time telling myself that purpose needed to be clear-cut, that it needed to be a single thing, a career, a passion project, a relationship, that I didn't realize I was setting myself up for disappointment. It's easy to think that once you find your purpose, everything else will fall into place. But what happens when your definition of purpose doesn't match the unfolding of your life? This was the problem. I wanted purpose to be static. I wanted it to be something I could pinpoint, something that would guide me like a well-marked trail in the woods. But life, as it turns out, doesn't work that way. There's no neatly painted line that takes you from one point to another. I think there's this misconception we have about success, too. That it's somehow tied to a singular purpose that we should be striving toward. We see others accomplishing things, and we feel like we should be doing the same. But in chasing that ideal, I'd lost track of the fact that purpose, real purpose, is not one thing. It's not one goal or one idea. It's an evolution. It shifts with you. The moment I realized this, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. Purpose doesn't need to be neatly defined. It's the compass, not the destination. And that realization was a relief. Think about it, if purpose was a fixed thing, then what happens when we outgrow it? What happens when we change? Would purpose then become irrelevant? The fear of losing it, of outgrowing it, seemed much scarier than the idea that it would evolve alongside us. The truth is, I wasn't supposed to find the purpose. I was supposed to let it evolve, adapt, and guide me as I learned more about myself, the world, and how I wanted to show up in it. Purpose isn't one thing, and it certainly isn't static. It's dynamic. It's in the process, in the doing, in the changing. And that's where freedom lies. The freedom to evolve. The freedom to create new definitions as you go along. As I started to embrace the fluidity of purpose, I found myself thinking more about the idea of arrival. What is it about that feeling of arriving somewhere that we all crave? It seems like the idea of finding purpose gets tangled up with this ideal of success, this belief that once we finally get it, once we find that perfect purpose, life will suddenly make sense. But what if that ideal is a trap? What if arrival isn't the end, but another beginning? I had been chasing that feeling of certainty for so long. I thought that if I could just do this one thing, hit that one milestone, then everything would be clear. I would finally feel like I was where I was supposed to be. But instead of providing peace, it just created anxiety. The more I thought about arriving at the perfect place, the more overwhelmed I felt. Because here's the thing, purpose is not a destination, but we often treat it like it is. We picture it as some final achievement, a concrete goal, a place we can point to and say, this is it. This is what I was meant to do. But when I really sat with that idea, I realized something crucial. If purpose was about arriving, then what happens once we get there? Would that make life feel complete, or would the pressure to stay in that perfect place forever just paralyze us with fear? And here's where the real shift started to happen for me. When I stopped looking for a destination, I stopped measuring my life by how far I'd gone or how close I was to some ultimate goal. Instead, I began to measure it by the quality of my presence, by how I showed up in every moment. Life became less about getting to the finish line and more about what I was doing along the way. It was liberating to realize that purpose wasn't something to be conquered. It wasn't a place to get to. It was something to experience, something to lean into, moment by moment. And once I let go of the idea that I had to arrive somewhere, everything changed. Suddenly, every day felt like a new opportunity to engage with purpose, not because I was trying to reach some final goal, but because the act of engaging itself was what gave life meaning. Now, when I think about purpose, I don't see a single goal. I see a process, an ongoing flow. Purpose is a tool, a guide that moves with you, through every season of life. It's the internal compass that helps you stay aligned with your values, but it doesn't have a fixed endpoint. The moment I accepted that, I started feeling lighter. I wasn't rushing to get somewhere anymore. I was just living. It turns out that the whole idea of arriving was part of the illusion. The real journey is living, not just getting to a place. The more I let go of the need for an ultimate destination, the more I discovered that purpose was present in everything I did, even in the mess and the uncertainty. At some point in the journey, I started to feel like purpose was something heavy, a burden. It wasn't a thrilling guide anymore, it was like a weight I had to carry around, always searching for the perfect answer, the perfect fit. I began to wonder, as I'm sure many of us do at times, what if I'm just not cut out for this? It's easy to get lost in the idea that purpose is supposed to be a driving force, something you can easily grasp and rely on. But when it feels like you're missing it, or that it's slipping away, it can become an enormous pressure. It's almost as if everyone else has their purpose neatly tied up in a bow, and you're standing there, with nothing more than a pile of loose ends. I started to think that maybe purpose was just too much to live up to, maybe it was this ideal that wasn't actually attainable. Maybe people were faking it, too. Or maybe there was just no right purpose, and the search was a fool's errand. But that was when I realized the most important truth of all: purpose, when we demand it to be something we fulfill, becomes a prison. It becomes a task, and when we make purpose a task, it loses its beauty, its openness, its ability to guide. I had spent so much time worrying about whether I was fulfilling my purpose in the right way that I had missed the point. Purpose isn't about ticking boxes or checking off a list of tasks that will bring you closer to some idealized version of yourself. It's not about measuring success by achievement or recognition, and it's certainly not about the external validation that everyone else is busy chasing. Purpose is about your relationship with the journey itself. It's about understanding that the ups and downs, the twists and turns, are part of the process. It's not about figuring it out once and for all, it's about staying present and open, even when everything feels uncertain. That's when I started to see that purpose doesn't have to come with pressure. Instead of seeking out a specific purpose that would satisfy some version of success I had built in my head, I learned to focus on the value of small actions and moments. It wasn't about searching for some grand, singular purpose that would explain everything. It was about creating purpose in every day, whether that meant listening to someone deeply, making time to reflect, or simply showing up and doing my best. It's amazing how that small shift, allowing purpose to be flexible and evolving, allowed me to breathe again. I could stop fighting against myself and start appreciating the present. Because I wasn't trying to fulfill an external checklist, I was living my own life, guided by my own values. In the past, when purpose felt like pressure, I used to recoil. I'd shut down, because I couldn't keep up with the pace I had set for myself. But when I stopped treating it like a weight and started seeing it as an evolving guide, everything started to flow much easier. The moments of clarity became easier to find. And I began to realize that the real challenge was not in finding the perfect purpose, it was in being open enough to allow it to change and adapt as I did. There's a certain freedom that comes with letting go of the idea that your purpose is something to be achieved. The moment I realized that purpose wasn't a mountain to climb or a final destination but a guiding thread through the tapestry of everyday life, things began to feel different. I wasn't waiting for a single, big purpose to show up anymore. Instead, I started seeing purpose everywhere, in the smallest of moments. It's fascinating, really, how purpose isn't just found in the monumental. It's woven into the everyday, the seemingly insignificant actions and choices we make. For a while, I had the misconception that purpose had to be loud. It had to be big. It had to be something visible, something I could point to and say, that is my purpose. But as time passed, I realized purpose often whispers rather than shouts. Take, for instance, the act of being present with someone. Listening attentively, truly hearing their words and emotions, that is purposeful. The way we show up for others, how we listen, how we offer kindness, care, or empathy, these are all acts of purpose. They're not flashy. They don't come with accolades. But they are powerful, and they form the very core of what gives our lives meaning. That's when I began to understand that purpose is often in the doing, not in the final product. I used to get caught up in the idea that purpose had to have an end result. There had to be something tangible I could show for it. But that mindset just led me to burnout and frustration. When I let go of the need for a concrete, end-result-driven purpose, I was able to experience purpose in the present, in the process of living itself. Here's the thing, purpose is often found in moments we overlook. It's in the morning routine, the act of making your bed, the small conversation with a friend or a stranger. It's in the way you choose to respond to stress or joy. It's how you show up when you don't have to. Those moments are the real essence of purpose. It's funny, but now that I've come to see purpose this way, I'm less concerned with the grandiose and more focused on the small, but deeply impactful ways I can live with intention. I don't have to be saving the world every day for my life to matter. Sometimes, purpose shows up in making sure I take a walk in nature, or in spending time with loved ones without checking my phone, or in being kind to myself when I fall short. In fact, one of the most profound moments I had regarding purpose wasn't a huge, aha moment, but rather a quiet morning of reflection. I sat on my couch, with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight filter through the window, and I realized that purpose was already there. Not in the future. Not in the work I was planning to do. But in the stillness of that moment. Purpose, in that instant, was simply being present, allowing myself to feel grateful for the things I already had, and knowing that everything else would unfold in time. Purpose, I learned, doesn't have to be a project. It doesn't have to have a checklist of things to accomplish. It's not about a giant goal or a high-profile mission. It's about living with intention, about choosing to move through life in a way that is true to yourself, no matter how small the steps might seem. And when you start to see purpose in those small things, your whole perspective shifts. Something I've come to understand about purpose is this: it's connected to passion, but not entirely defined by it. Passion burns bright. It excites. It fuels movement. But like all flames, it can flicker. It can fade. And when it does, you're left with a quiet question. Does my purpose still matter if the fire isn't burning? The answer, I believe, is yes. Because purpose isn't just energy, it's commitment. It's meaning. It's the thread that holds you steady when the spark goes dim. For a while, I thought that purpose and passion were inseparable. If I was passionate about something, then that must mean it was my true purpose. I assumed that if I lost the passion, I would lose the purpose as well. But over time, I came to realize that passion isn't the end-all, be-all of purpose. In fact, purpose can exist in the quiet moments, in the spaces where passion isn't pushing you to the next big thing. Passion is often loud, sometimes explosive, and while it can give us the fuel to begin, it can also burn out quickly if we're not careful. Purpose, however, is much more grounded. It doesn't require the same intense energy. Instead, purpose is more like a steady rhythm. It's the quiet hum in the background that keeps you moving even when the bursts of energy from passion begin to fade. Let's take a moment to think about how we usually see passion. We picture it as this all-consuming fire. You know, the kind of fire that burns bright and hot, that makes us feel like we can take on the world. But when that fire dims, it can leave us wondering if the purpose was ever really there in the first place. But what if purpose is actually better when it's not based solely on passion? What if it's about finding a deeper connection to the act of doing, even when you're not feeling that initial spark of excitement? This is where the balance between passion and purpose becomes important. Passion might get you started, but purpose is what keeps you going. Even when the excitement wanes. Even when the fire burns out. Purpose remains steady, like a compass guiding you through the dark or uncertain times. You don't need to feel electric with passion all the time to live with purpose. Purpose is about showing up, about doing the work even when it's hard, even when it feels like it's not fun. It's the commitment to the process. Passion might give you the push to begin, but purpose gives you the will to continue, even when the rush of excitement fades. The secret, I think, is understanding that passion isn't the sole source of purpose. Instead, purpose is more than just a feeling, it's a way of being. And once you realize that, you can start to show up even when the passion feels like it's left the building. Purpose isn't a flash of energy. It's a quiet fire that smolders and sustains you. It's incredible how much pressure we put on ourselves to define purpose in a singular way. We've been conditioned to believe that purpose must be clear-cut, something specific and neatly tied up. But the longer I think about it, the more I realize that this rigid thinking about purpose limits us. Life isn't neat. It doesn't come with pre-made instructions, and neither does our purpose. The real shift came when I started allowing purpose to be more than just one thing. Instead of treating it as a singular destination that I needed to find, I started seeing it as something that could evolve over time. Purpose isn't confined to a moment in your life, a job, or even a single mission. It stretches with you, changes with you, and helps you find meaning in whatever stage of life you're in. But that's not how I always thought of it. I used to think that if I didn't know exactly what my purpose was by a certain age or at a certain point in my career, I'd missed it. That I had somehow failed. The pressure of that thought was almost suffocating. Every time I felt I was making progress, it would be undermined by that nagging doubt, is this really my purpose, or just another distraction? I remember the days when I would look at people who seemed so sure of their purpose, and I'd feel this overwhelming sense of envy. They had a vision. They knew what they were doing. And there I was, stumbling along, trying to put the pieces together. You know what I realized? I was trying to measure myself against something that wasn't even real. I'd look at how sure everyone else seemed and wonder why I felt so unsure. But most of the time, that's certainty. It's just surface. It doesn't mean they've figured it all out. And it definitely doesn't mean they're living with purpose. Purpose isn't about having it all together, it's about showing up real. Purpose is not about finding the perfect thing to do. It's not about ticking boxes on a list. Purpose is about listening to your inner compass and allowing that guide to shift and adapt as you grow. Sometimes your purpose will be about your career, other times about your family, or your personal growth, or even about your hobbies. It's fluid. It's not static. What I had to understand was that there's no one-size-fits-all definition of purpose. What works for one person won't work for everyone. And that's okay. Life is too short to hold yourself to someone else's timeline or path. The more I let go of the idea that purpose was a single fixed destination, the more space I had to explore what actually mattered to me. I realized that purpose wasn't a treasure hunt. It was more like gardening. It takes time. You plant seeds, nurture them, watch them grow, and some things flourish, while others wither and teach you lessons along the way. So, I stopped looking for that one thing. Instead, I started focusing on what felt right in the moment. What could I do today that aligned with my values, even if I wasn't sure where it would lead? The pressure of needing to know everything disappeared. It became less about the big picture and more about the little steps that led me to the bigger vision. It's about process, not just results. When I let go of this need for certainty, I gave myself the freedom to try new things, to experiment, and to learn from the journey itself. It became less about figuring it out and more about embracing the unknown and trusting that purpose would reveal itself in its own time, in its own way. There's a funny thing about staying too focused on purpose. It can keep you from truly experiencing life. When I was obsessed with finding the right purpose, I was so busy looking ahead that I couldn't enjoy the present. It was as if the future held all the answers, and if I just worked hard enough, everything would eventually fall into place. But what I missed was the living part, the beauty of experiencing life right now, without needing to make everything fit into a neat narrative. What happens when you fixate too much on finding purpose is that you end up not living in the moment. You get lost in the idea of purpose, constantly looking for the next thing, thinking, once I find it, once I've figured this out, then I'll be happy. Then I'll have meaning. But here's the secret, you're already living. Right now. The life you're searching for, the purpose you're trying to define, is already in motion. It's already happening. The question is, are you paying attention? I used to treat purpose like a far-off land, this distant goal that I would eventually stumble upon. But what I learned was that if you don't live with purpose in the moment, you'll always feel like you're chasing something. It's like chasing a shadow, you're running, but it's always a step ahead of you. You can't catch it. So instead, I started focusing less on chasing some future version of myself and more on how I could live intentionally right now. When I stopped looking at the future for answers, I started to see purpose everywhere. It wasn't in the distant goals or the end results, it was in the way I made my morning coffee, the way I interacted with people, the way I spent my time, even if it was just walking down the street, letting my mind wander. That, I realized, was where purpose was hiding all along. Not in some distant place, but in the ordinary moments of my daily life. I think we often forget that purpose isn't just something you can find. It's something you build, moment by moment, action by action. It's how you engage with the world, how you show up for yourself and for others. And it's not something you should be constantly looking for, it's something you live. This is where I started to truly trust the process. Purpose doesn't have to be some grand revelation. It doesn't need to be announced or even fully understood all at once. It's okay if it's messy and undefined. It's okay if it changes. What matters is that you are here, showing up for the ride. Not waiting for some future version of purpose to knock on your door. And here's the beautiful thing about being present with purpose, it gives you the freedom to let go of perfectionism. You don't have to get everything right. You don't have to know exactly where you're going. You just have to be willing to show up, to do your best in the here and now. And as long as you're aligned with your values, your purpose will unfold. Let's be real here, life doesn't have an instruction manual. There's no right way to do it. It's messy, and that's okay. Purpose is in the mess. It's in the process, the growth, and even the mistakes. So I let go of trying to fit purpose into a tidy little box. I let go of the need for certainty. I embraced the uncertainty of the journey. Because I realized, if I keep chasing purpose like it's a prize at the end of a race, I'm missing the point entirely. At some point, I realized that the more I obsessed over purpose, the more I sabotaged myself. I became so consumed by the idea of doing it right, of finding my perfect fit, that I lost sight of the joy of just being. I started measuring my life by whether I was ticking boxes, was I on the right path? Was I making the right choices? Was I fulfilling the ultimate purpose I'd set for myself? The truth is, when we try to force purpose into a mold, we take away its power. Purpose isn't meant to be confined to a rigid set of rules or expectations. It isn't something to be controlled or micromanaged. When we try to do that, we end up feeling trapped, unable to live freely or authentically. What I began to see was that purpose wasn't a checklist. It was a way of being. It was a way of showing up, of making choices based on the values that align with who I truly am. The minute I stopped treating purpose like an exam I had to pass and started treating it like a conversation with myself, things shifted. Purpose began to feel less like an external pressure and more like an internal guide. It wasn't about chasing external validation, approval, or ticking off successful steps on the ladder. It was about asking myself, does this align with who I am? Does this reflect the person I want to be, the impact I want to have, even in the smallest ways? For the first time, I understood that I didn't need someone else's definition of purpose. I didn't need to measure myself against other people's standards. I had been so afraid of not measuring up that I forgot the only measurement that mattered was my own sense of fulfillment and authenticity. When we stop focusing on the destination and start paying attention to the small moments, purpose becomes an ongoing process rather than a singular point in time. It's not something that can be achieved once and for all. It's something that evolves with us, changing with our needs, our growth, and our experiences. Living with purpose, in this new understanding, isn't about the constant search for the right fit, it's about living with awareness. It's about slowing down enough to notice the choices you're making in real time and reflecting on whether those choices align with your values. It's about looking within to see if you're living in integrity with your own truth, rather than constantly looking outside for validation. In fact, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was this: purpose doesn't require validation. The more I searched for someone to tell me I was doing things right, the less I could hear my own voice. And once I stopped seeking external approval, I began to listen to that voice more clearly. It's not a voice of certainty, but of curiosity and exploration. It invites me to wonder, what would happen if I tried this? What if I just took this one step forward, without knowing the full answer? Letting go of the need for validation doesn't mean rejecting feedback or ignoring the wisdom of others. It means trusting that the answers lie within you, and learning to honor that inner compass. As I continued to let go of the idea that purpose was something fixed and external, I started to realize how much my obsession with finding it had caused me to miss out on the richness of living. Purpose wasn't just about finding something, it was about engaging with the world in a way that felt authentic. It wasn't about achieving an end goal, but about showing up every day, trusting that the path would reveal itself as I walked. I think one of the most important lessons I learned during this process was how much we're conditioned to think that purpose should be clear, immediate, and concrete. We live in a society that glorifies certainty and achievement, that places a premium on clear paths and direct lines from point A to point B. It's no wonder, then, that we get so caught up in this idea that purpose must be something we can define and measure. The truth is, though, that purpose often hides in the unknown, in the places where we don't have all the answers. It's in the moments of uncertainty, in the uncomfortable spaces where we're unsure of what's next. Purpose doesn't always come with a roadmap. Sometimes, it's the willingness to step into the unknown, to be in the uncertainty, that reveals the truest forms of purpose. I had to learn to be comfortable with not knowing. Not knowing where I was going, not knowing how things would turn out, and not knowing if what I was doing would ultimately work in the way I envisioned. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when we're conditioned to think that life is something we need to control or have figured out. The shift came when I realized this: not having it all figured out isn't a weakness, it's power. It means you're no longer trapped in someone else's timeline. You're free to explore, to pivot, to build something that actually fits you. Uncertainty isn't a void, it's potential waiting to be shaped. And once you stop chasing perfection, you start chasing what's real. I think that's where purpose really lives, in the freedom to evolve. In the freedom to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm okay with that. When we embrace the uncertainty and allow ourselves the space to grow, we allow purpose to emerge naturally. We stop fighting against the flow of life and start moving with it. For the first time in a long time, I stopped chasing purpose like it was something I could arrive at. Instead, I started living it, every day, in every moment. I stopped waiting for a lightning bolt of clarity to strike. Instead, I trusted that by showing up with intention and an open heart, I would be moving toward what was meant for me. That was the real shift. I stopped thinking of purpose as something I needed to attain, and started thinking of it as something I was already living, in the way I showed up for myself, for others, and for the world around me. The more I leaned into the unknown, the more my purpose became clear, not in a grand, definitive sense, but in the little moments where I felt aligned and at peace with my actions. Living in uncertainty, embracing the unknown, those aren't just philosophical concepts. They are the daily practice that keeps purpose alive. And I'll admit, it's not always easy. In fact, it's often downright uncomfortable. There are days when I still get caught up in the idea that I should be further along, that I should have everything sorted out. It's hard to shake off the pressure to perform, to measure progress by external standards rather than internal alignment. But that's the thing about purpose, it's not about meeting a deadline, crossing off items on a list, or impressing others with how, together, you look. It's about how you navigate the in-between spaces, the ones where the path isn't clearly marked, where you can't see the end but know, deep down, you're on the right road. This is where the real beauty of purpose resides, in the journey, not the destination. It's the act of showing up, even when you don't have a clear idea of where you're headed. It's about trusting that each step you take, no matter how small or uncertain, is leading you somewhere meaningful. When I stopped trying to control the outcome, when I stopped obsessing over how my life would look by some external measure of success, I realized that the process itself, every decision, every moment of uncertainty, was what gave life its meaning. That's not to say there aren't days when doubt creeps in. There are definitely days when I wonder if I'm on the right path. But that's also part of the process. It's not about having perfect clarity all the time. It's about being willing to move forward, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about continuing the journey because you trust that something meaningful will emerge, even if it doesn't always look like what you expected. We're often taught that life is supposed to be a straight line, a series of neatly laid out steps from childhood to adulthood, from student to professional, from uncertainty to certainty. But the reality is messier. It's more like a series of twists, turns, detours, and sometimes even backward steps. And that's okay. In fact, I think it's vital to embrace the detours. The times when we feel off track are often the moments where we learn the most about who we are and what we're capable of. Purpose doesn't always look like what we think it should, and it doesn't always happen in linear progressions. Sometimes, the most important lessons come from taking a step back or wandering down an unexpected path. Purpose is in the act of exploration, of being willing to try things, fail, adapt, and try again. It's not about reaching a specific point, but about creating something meaningful out of the journey itself. I realized that, instead of worrying about what my purpose was going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, I needed to focus on how I was showing up today. What choices was I making? Was I living with intention? Was I being authentic? Was I allowing myself to be present, even in the discomfort of uncertainty? It's easy to get caught up in the pressure to define purpose in black and white terms, to think that it's something you have to pinpoint or achieve. But purpose, I've come to understand, is something we live and experience, moment by moment. It's about engaging fully with life as it unfolds, and trusting that, even in the moments of doubt, there is meaning in simply showing up. And you know what? That's enough. The more I allowed myself to embrace the uncertainty of life, the more I realized that purpose wasn't something I had to find. It was something I had to create, in the small decisions I made, the way I approached the world, and the values I chose to live by. I think this is where a lot of us get stuck. We expect purpose to show up, fully formed, with a loud, clear voice telling us exactly what to do. But that's not how it works. I spent years looking for a sign, for a clear message from the universe that would point me toward my ultimate purpose. I thought there was some grand plan out there, waiting for me to discover it. But the longer I looked, the more I realized, purpose doesn't come with a neon sign. It's not something you find, it's something you live into. It emerges from the way you approach life, from the choices you make in each moment, from how you choose to engage with the world around you. I think the key here is not about figuring out what your purpose is, but rather allowing yourself to live authentically, to follow the things that feel meaningful to you, even if they don't make sense to anyone else. It's about trusting that the more you show up as your true self, the more purpose will naturally align with that authenticity. When I started to let go of the pressure to find some grand, all-encompassing purpose, I felt a shift. Instead of obsessing over what my purpose should be, I started focusing on how I wanted to show up each day. I asked myself, what do I want to contribute to the world? How can I live in alignment with my values? And those small, daily choices began to accumulate in a way that made me feel like I was living a life that mattered. The more I trusted myself, the more I allowed purpose to unfold organically. I stopped worrying about whether I was doing it right, and started focusing on whether I was doing it authentically. That doesn't mean I always know what's coming next. It doesn't mean I have it all figured out. But it does mean that I've stopped seeing purpose as something I have to find, and instead, I've started to see it as something I create, moment by moment. There's a lot of pressure these days to have it all together, to present a polished, curated version of your life to the world. We're told that if we don't have a clear, defined purpose, we're somehow falling behind. But the truth is, purpose doesn't always look like what we think it should. It doesn't need to be a grand achievement or a visible, measurable goal. Sometimes, purpose is quiet. It's subtle. It's in the moments of connection, in the small acts of kindness, in the way you live your life every day. It's taken me a while to accept this, but I now believe that living with purpose doesn't require a grand, epic plan. It just requires showing up, being true to yourself, and making choices that align with who you are. It's about finding meaning in the ordinary, in the daily moments, and trusting that as long as you're being authentic, you're already living with purpose. Purpose doesn't need to be a destination. It's not a place to reach. It's a guide that's already present within you, always shifting, always evolving. And the more I let go of the need to control it, the more it reveals itself in unexpected and beautiful ways. It's funny how much we complicate things. We think purpose is this grand revelation, something we have to work tirelessly toward, a distant beacon of light we can only reach after years of toil and self-discovery. But the longer I've been on this journey, the more I've realized that the greatest discovery isn't finding purpose, it's learning to live with it, to make it a part of your everyday existence. There's something profoundly simple about the idea that purpose is not something we need to achieve, but something we can experience in the everyday moments of life. It's in the conversations we have, the decisions we make, the way we choose to show up for ourselves and for others. It's not just in the big achievements, but in the small, seemingly insignificant moments. Purpose is embedded in those moments, in the way we carry ourselves through each day. I used to think purpose was an abstract, elusive thing. Something that would give my life meaning if I could just get my hands on it. I was waiting for a sign, for clarity, for the one thing that would unlock it all. But here's the irony, once I stopped waiting for purpose to come from some external source and started looking inward, I realized I had been living with it all along. It's not a switch that flips, but rather a slow, unfolding process. Each day, each moment, is an opportunity to align yourself with what feels true and authentic. Purpose is in the choice to be present. It's in how you move through life, how you engage with others, and how you respond to challenges. The more I embraced this idea, the less pressure I felt to figure it all out. Instead of stressing over what my purpose was, I started thinking about how I could live purposefully in the here and now. Purpose is less about the destination and more about the way we walk through the world. It's about bringing intention to every action. It's about showing up, being open, and trusting that the steps you take today are leading you somewhere meaningful, even if you don't have a clear roadmap. The more I accepted this, the more I felt at peace with my journey. What's amazing is that when you stop putting so much pressure on yourself to get it right, you start to realize that you've been living in alignment with purpose all along. It's not a one-time decision, but a continuous process. It's a dynamic force that evolves with you, helping you navigate uncertainty that is always there, but can be transformed into a powerful guide. And in that transformation, I discovered something else that had been elusive: peace. There is peace in allowing your purpose to unfold, in letting go of the need for a final destination, and trusting that you're exactly where you need to be. The beauty of life lies in this unfolding process, the quiet, steady progress we make with each passing moment, even when it doesn't feel like we're going anywhere. So, as I move forward, I no longer think of purpose as something to be found. I think of it as something to be lived. It's a guide. A quiet voice that reminds me to stay true to myself, to honor my values, and to trust the path that's unfolding before me. It's not about perfection. It's not about having all the answers. It's about living with intention, with authenticity, and with an open heart. Purpose isn't something that arrives all at once. It's something you create, moment by moment. It's in the way you engage with the world and the choices you make along the way. And as I continue this journey, I feel a deep sense of peace, knowing that I don't need to arrive anywhere. I'm already on the path.